Today on Bible Conversations, we're going to be talking about God is Creator. We're starting a new series today entitled God Is, and we're really excited about this series because honestly there's a lot of things that God can be described as, right?
There really are, and there's honestly a lot of things that the world describes God as that's false.
Yeah.
I've heard people describe God as evil, right? Like, how can God allow certain things to happen to certain people, right? I've described God as being unloving, right? Well, how can God command the killing of so many people, and in the Old Testament and stuff like that? So I think it's
or even more than that. God is fake,
Yeah, God is fake.
One
God
way
is not real.
Yeah, that's
right?
one way people will describe him.
There's even a movie, God is real, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, just the idea of what God is, I think, is such a crucial topic for any Christian and really for any person. Because if God is real, well, then he demands and deserves to be worshipped, right? And that's
if you understand,
yes,
God. If you're thinking of a little g God, then that may not deserve worship. Probably does not deserve worship.
Yeah, well, and when I say God, I guess I probably got to clarify. I mean the God of the Bible, right?
Yeah.
I mean the God that created the world, that created the heavens and earth. And we'll get into that in here in a little bit. But what are we starting off with today, Dylan?
Well, I just wanted to kind of introduce the topic by taking folks to Ephesians 4:6.
Right.
That's really where the idea of this series God is comes from. And Ephesians 4:6 says, after running through all the ones as Paul's walking through those, he says in verse 6, one God, one Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. You see, there's a whole lot more to God than we can even grasp. If he's over all and through all and in all, well, all, first of all, is a lot.
Yes,
and
yes, it is.
God is above and through and in all. That there's so much more to God than we realize sometimes. And so even if we spent the next 2 months on this series, we wouldn't even be able to scratch the surface of who God is.
Well, and I think also the idea that we can define God in a way that, like you can define a table, right?
Yeah.
Table has 4 legs, and it is it's sturdy, right? You can set stuff on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those legs can fold in and out. Sometimes they're just static. Sometimes you get a leaf inside the table. You can define a table. You can even describe a table to where somebody who's not listening is able to, or somebody who is just listening, right? They don't have a visual of it, can say, "Oh yeah, no, that's a table."
Yeah.
But the idea that we as humans can define and describe God in a way that accurately depicts all of him, right, is insane. Like, there's absolutely no way.
Yeah.
What we can try and do is understand God to the best of our ability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're trying to do here.
Well, for example, the Cowboys in the 90s. I wasn't alive to watch them, but my dad can describe them to me. The TV can describe them to me.
Yeah.
Do they even get close to scratching the surface of everything that the Cowboys in the 90s were about? Absolutely not, because that's a decade that you're trying to cover and describe to someone. So, no matter how many YouTube videos I watch, no matter how many times I sit and talk with my dad about the Cowboys, they're not going to really be able to fully tell me about the 90s Cowboys.
Yes.
The greatest team of all time. However, the same thing is true for God. We're not even going to be able to scratch the surface, but did I get a glimpse of what it was like to be a Cowboys fan in the 90s? Yeah, and I would have loved to be around and cheering for the Cowboys in the 90s.
As opposed to the 20-plus years that we've had now of nothing?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Same thing's true for God, though. Can we give people a glimpse of what it's like to be a child of his, to tell people what he's like? Absolutely we can. Will we be able to cover everything, be able to really even understand everything if we spend the rest of our lifetime trying to understand, wrap our mind around God? No, because we're finite beings trying to understand an infinite being. It's simply impossible.
Yeah.
But we can get a glimpse.
We can get a glimpse. And also we can help people to understand why we worship and serve the God that we serve.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I think that really kind of is the bottom line of understanding who God is he calls for us to worship him. He wants us to worship him. And if we understand who God is, at least to a point where we are comfortable worshiping him and we want to worship him, right, then that's an important thing to be able to share. So anyway, let you go a little bit more, and then
on that note, talking about a God that's worth worshiping, really, that's why we wanted to start this series with God is creator.
Yes.
Because it shows that he is above all and through all and in all through his creation.
Yes.
So Genesis chapter 1 verse 1,
yes.
the very first words penned in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Yeah.
And with those 10 words right there, it tells us everything that we need to know about God. And Chris is counting up the 10 words for me right now to make sure I'm right on that. But it tells us everything that we need to know, that he is beyond the creation.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions, we talked about what the world might say God is.
Yeah.
One of the biggest misconceptions is that, God is maybe just a step or two above Superman. and the reason is because we think, all powerful. He's got all the strength in the world,
Yeah.
He can fly. He can do this and that,
Yeah.
He
can shoot lasers out of his eyes.
I'm sure God can.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Superman there.
Yeah. if he wanted to, I'm sure he can. But that's the false view, is that, he's a very, very powerful being, but Superman himself is finite.
Yeah.
He is not beyond creation.
Yes.
And that's what makes God different. That's what makes him God.
Yeah.
Is that he is beyond creation. Because when you look at Genesis 1:1, there are 3 things created there. In the beginning, there's time.
Yeah.
God created time. God created the heavens, that's space, and the earth, that's matter.
Yeah.
And within each of those things, if God is not beyond any of those 3 things, he is not God.
Yeah. Well, and he has to be. He has to be above them. Otherwise, you can't create something that you're not above.
Exactly.
Right? Like a table doesn't create a person.
No.
Right? A person creates a table. And so it's really just vitally important that we do understand that God is not a comic book superhero. Right? God is not a tangible thing that we can see necessarily, right? God is above all of these things.
Yeah.
And he created all of these things, right? The idea that you went back to in Ephesians 4:6, right? God is in all. Well, not only did God create heaven and earth, right, and time itself, but he's in all of that.
Yeah.
Right? Like he is time, he is heaven, he is earth. Like he is all of these things, and we have to make sure that we understand that God is so much bigger than anything we will ever grasp.
Well, and by being bigger, he is completely unaffected by time, space, and matter. God is an eternal being. He's unaffected by time. He is in the spiritual realm. He's not affected by our space or our matter. He is unaffected by creation.
Well, and that right there is so the law of thermodynamics, right? The first law of thermodynamics is incredibly important to this conversation.
Matter cannot be created or destroyed. It just changes form.
Yeah, it just changes form, right?
More or less. It was a long time ago when I took physics.
And so the idea that matter cannot be created or destroyed, right, means that at some point or another, the matter had to come into existence. It had to be created. Otherwise, how do we have it, right? So there has to be something or someone outside of our natural laws.
Yeah.
And that's God, right? If there's nothing outside of our natural laws, well, where did we come from, right? We didn't come from gelatinous goo billions of years ago.
Well, and it goes all the way back to, in the beginning, matter came from somewhere, and if that somewhere wasn't beyond the matter, then it simply did not come into being. If that something that created the matter is beyond the matter, that's worth worshiping, and we call that God.
Yeah, well, and there's a reason that, the scientists at NASA, some of the brightest minds that have ever lived, are unable to find life anywhere else.
Yeah.
And they won't, because it's here, because God created Earth for us. The way that the world works, the way that the Earth functions, the way it rotates, everything, it was all planned. It was all a part of God's plan. So as we kind of look at that, right, you look at Psalm 8, Psalm 8, verse 3, when I look at your heavens, right? This is the psalmist writing to God. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place. God created the moon, the stars, the heavens, the sun, the earth. I mean, he created all of that. And that's just impressive and amazing. And I can barely make a round ball with Play-Doh, right? Like, and God created stars.
Well, the incredible thing is he spoke that into existence.
Yes.
And also really cool is that our sun, it's a star. And if you compare our sun to other stars in the universe, our sun is very, very tiny.
Yeah.
And God created all of that and is beyond all that. I spoke it into existence. The simple fact that we can describe God as creator should be enough for anybody to say, wow, I need to learn more about why he created me.
Yeah.
I need to learn more about him. And it's just, it blows your mind when you actually take a second to think about everything in creation.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, you can even go to the human body itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You can go to the human body itself. And Psalm 139 talks about this in verse 13, right? For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. God created all of us. And if you just look at the way the human body functions, right? Like the veins that go from your heart to all of your extremities, right? The heart, I mean, the aortic valves and the different valves they have, right? The brain, how it functions, and it tells different parts of your body to, like, you move your hands, that's because your brain is telling your hands to move.
Yeah. Well, even just down to the details within your eye.
Yeah, and I was about to get to that, right? The eye alone is probably one of the most incredible creations of all time. And you look at our eyes, right? Like the eyelid is there to protect it, but there's even a protective covering over the eye itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at the way the iris actually works. So technically when you open your eyes, you actually see things upside down.
Yeah.
But it flips so that you can see right side up. And then you look at different animals' eyes, right? And the way that they're created, and realize that God created all of those too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't, like, things didn't just naturally happen and spawn over time, right? Like, the theory of evolution, macro evolution, is just so false, right?
Yeah.
Like, a frog did not spawn a cat. That did not happen.
Yeah.
But the microevolution, right, of different subspecies, that, okay, right? That we have evidence of that. But, man, God created all of these things.
Yeah.
He created you, he created me, he created all of the listeners, right? He created all of the animals, created the mountains. Everything works because God designed it.
Mm-hmm.
You want someone to design your home, ask the big man upstairs. Right?
Yeah. Well, and that's why I want to start with God as creator. Because obviously, if we're talking about creation, or if we're talking about really anything, you got to start at the beginning.
Yep.
The beginning is creation.
Yes.
But also, even more than that, it speaks to the power of God. It speaks to really who he is. He is creator. He is so much more powerful than we can even fathom. Mm-hmm. So before I go into really the last verse that I had, I want to share something with our listeners.
Yeah.
So we have been doing this podcast for a little over a year now. Have we?
Almost a year.
Almost a year.
We are 1 month away from a year. 11 months.
We have almost hit a year.
And that's not an April Fool's joke either.
So with that being said, the new month came around here in April. New rankings came out in the podcast, and we are so excited to share with everyone that we are actually ranked in the top 2.5% of podcasts.
What do you mean podcasts?
Worldwide.
Oh, like all of them? All
podcasts around the world. And that's thanks to y'all. That's thanks to you guys listening right now that has happened. And so we want to give y'all a
huge shout out.
A hearty thanks. Yep. And with that being said, if y'all can help us out just a little bit more, we really want to make that top 2% by the time this 1 year comes around. So we've got a month to do this. Yeah. We want y'all to share this with your friends. We want y'all to
share your favorite podcast.
Share your favorite one to Facebook, Instagram, wherever you use social media, to emails, whatever you may do. If you're an Apple user, iPhone, get on Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. We want your help, and we're so grateful to everyone for the encouragement that we've got over these past 11 months.
But for sticking with us. I mean, really, if we had gotten no listeners while we were doing this, we wouldn't still be doing it, right?
No.
Like, we do this, one, we enjoy it, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, we do enjoy these conversations. It is encouraging for us to talk about God, to talk about the scriptures.
But we'd be having these conversations without mics in front of us.
Exactly, right? We wouldn't be recording them. And so we record these conversations for you. And just a huge, huge thank you. Because, it makes it worthwhile for us to know, when we get on and we look at the stats of our podcast, right? And we see how many downloads happen in a day and it's off the charts. We're like, dude, that's awesome, right? That makes us happy. Not so much that you're listening to us, but that you're hopefully talking about the scriptures. That you're talking about God, that you're having
leads to more conversations.
Bible conversation, which is the whole purpose of what this is. So anyway, as Dylan said, I'm going to echo, just thank you all.
All right, well, back to God as creator. The reason that it's so important to recognize God as creator is because it leads to worship, right? If you're worshiping a God, and many of us do, even some of us who claim to be Christians, worship false gods, whether it be money, whether it be sports, careers, you name it. Those are simply called idols in Scripture, and those are little g gods. The reason it's so important to talk about God as creator is because it recognizes him as big G God. And I want to take y'all to Romans real quick because
we're going to Rome?
To Romans, the book of Romans, chapter 1, because
you were going to pay for a plane ticket for me to go to Rome?
No, I'm sorry. In Romans chapter 1, we get an idea of why God is worth worshiping and really what creation has to say about that. But in Romans 1, starting in verse 20, it says, "For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made." To put it simply, creation declares a creator. And there's no two ways about that. When you look at creation, you can see God's hand at work.
Yeah.
And that's really why big G God is worth worshiping.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy thing is, if we were able to put big G God, right, put Jehovah, put Yahweh in a box and be able to fully define him and be able to fully understand him, he really wouldn't be worth worshiping.
No.
Right? Like if he didn't create all these things, if he didn't do all of these things, if he didn't send his only son, all of these things, right? If he didn't do the things that he has done, and if he wasn't capable of doing the things that he has done, speaking the world into existence, the only thing that happens when I speak is my breath stinks, right? Like that's it, right? And then sounds come out of my mouth, right?
Yeah.
Not only does God speak, but he creates things when he speaks.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely mind-blowing. Like it really is. And so we worship our God, and God is creator, right? Because of all the things that he's done and shown us.
Yeah.
And
back to what you were saying about if you could put Jehovah God in a box, then he wouldn't be worth worshiping.
No.
But because we know that the Jehovah, Yahweh, he is beyond that, that's why he is worth worshiping.
Yes.
However, sometimes we take things that you can put in a box and try to worship that. Take things like
a cell phone?
Like a cell phone. You can put that in a box.
It's literally inside boxes all of the time.
Yeah.
Comes in one.
Your career, you can put that inside a box. Your sports, you can put those in a box. You name it. If it's not the creator of everything, you can put it in a box. Therefore, it's simply not worth anything. It's not worth worship.
Exactly. And I don't know. I think every time I read through Romans chapter 1, really starts in verse 18, right? The idea of wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and the unrighteous people, right? And how they know that God is there because of his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, right? It's not just believers that will be judged, but everybody's going to be judged.
All people, because there's no way to deny that there's a God, because the simple question, where did we come from, leads to the answer, God.
Yeah, we had to be created. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We had to be created by something. And unless there is something that is outside of creation itself, well, I mean, creation's got to start somewhere, right? Like if you take our lineage all the way back, right? Well, my mother had me. Okay, well, who had your mother? Her mother. Well, keep going, right? Keep going all the way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, eventually you get back to the first people. Well,
Yeah.
How did the first people get here, right? Either macroevolution is true, it's not, or God created people, right? Like those are the two options, right? Either people evolved from something that is lesser than what we are, which we have zero evidence of, or God created us, which we have clearly perceived since the creation of the world.
Well, it's just either matter created matter or God created matter.
Yeah.
God's beyond matter. Matter can't create itself. It's 2 + 2.
Yes, it really is. And I hope that those of you listening, I think we're kind of wrapping up here.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that you guys listening are encouraged by this to go and talk about this. Maybe you've got a friend who is an atheist. Maybe you have a friend who is questioning whether or not God exists. And maybe this podcast has given you some idea of kind of where to look and where to go and how to start that conversation. And if so, we are incredibly grateful for that. Our goal here, again, at Bible Conversations is to help you guys start conversations. That's our literal job. We do that for a living. But not everybody does. And it's difficult. And it's scary. And it's tough. But I think this is such a good topic to start with. Anybody. You can start this topic with anybody because there is so much evidence out there. And there is so much truth to be heard. And we just want to encourage you to take that step, to be brave, to be bold, and to talk about God as creator.
Mm-hmm. And from there, we'll go into next week. Looking forward to talking throughout this series about God is. And we're going to explore a little bit more about God in the coming weeks. So we appreciate all of our listeners.
Yes.
I hope you all go out, start conversations, talk about the Bible, talk about God. And in the next few seconds, listen to how you can contact us. Listen to how you can reach out to us and support us. We love you all, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for listening to the Bible Conversations podcast. I want to tell you about a couple of ways in which you can be involved or help us out. You can like us on Facebook and share our posts. You can send us an email at kcocbibleconversations@gmail.com. You can follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can even leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We're also partnering with Ministry League. This is a wonderful app full of so many different resources to help you grow your faith. We love you all. Now let's go start a conversation.